would grind the surface, and then it would expose. Now the thing with granite, what you can do with it, as you can see there, is you can make all different kind of patterns with it. They put either stainless steel or bronze strips to delineate between the two patterns, and it does a couple of things here. First of all, an area, a floor like this, if it was left one big piece of terrazzo, there would be a lot of cracking going on. There's movement in the building, and these dividing strips help as far as alleviate that, because it keeps it down into a smaller mass. And then also, of course, they make it any way they want it as far as the pattern goes, and it helps them with doing the.
Anybody here recognize this floor, where it is? It's Oracle, right?
Oracle, yeah, it's the conference center
Yes.
at Oracle up there in Redwood Shores. Terrazzo is a great floor from a point of view of maintenance, because once it's installed and polished, it's very, very hard, and it doesn't take as much maintenance as like a marble, straight marble floor will. And the old way of doing this was, they would grind it and expose it, and then put a couple of coats of sealer and some Johnson wax on that. In fact, they used to do that with most of the stone floors, that the wax was the wearing surface, and that it always looked great once they'd done it the night before, and then the next day, after a little bit of traffic, all the footmarks would show up, and you're constantly spray buffing this thing, stripping it, and doing all the rest of it. But the process used now, I'm sorry, yes?
I've seen it done with chips of mirror.
Oh yeah, they could do anything. We had some with mother of pearl in their abalone shells. Well, you can do just about anything with that there and make all your designs. The new Transbay Terminal going up in San Francisco is going to have this, and I believe they commissioned 2 or 3 different artists to come up with a design. And the floor is going to be a work of art when it's done. And you see this in most of the airport terminals now, is they do mainly the terrazzo down here at Monetto. We've done all the ones in Oakland there. With San Francisco, we do quite a bit over in there. So it's a very good, hard-wearing surface, and depending on architecturally what you're looking for, it can be quite creative. And a agglomerate is just another name for the terrazzo, or you can buy a tile which is of agglomerate that is manufactured much before, and it's just done where it's set in a polyester or a base such as that, which is the way the floors are done now. Rather than an inch of concrete, it's around about 3 inches of a resin base, and then they just broadcast the stone into that. Then you've got the cultured or the foam marble, and that once again is just a resin-based product that they use a lot of in kitchen countertops and things like that. And they would just use this resin and then color this thing and can do all kinds of things with it. It's not the greatest thing because it's fairly soft. Certainly you can't really use it very well on the floor and that, but they use a lot of it. That's, I guess, poor man's marble, you might want to call it. Although there are stones out now that are coming out. I believe Caesar stone is one. There's a few others that are very high quality, very expensive that they are making. But once again, it's just a combination of the natural stone that's put in with a binder. And stones found all over the world. Doesn't matter where you are. Every country's got any kind of stone and that, and it's either in mountains or they're even underground. And once again, let's just go back to what I mentioned earlier. This stone is normally formed 10, 11, 12, 30 miles underground, and over the years, with all the upheaval going on in the earth, this stone comes to the surface. You go down to Yosemite and you're looking at nothing but granite. Because I guess one of the famous ones is Carrera Ripley, where there is the Carrera stone there that's mined on the mountaintops. If you ever look at a satellite picture of Carrera, it looks like it's snow, but it's actually the exposed Carrera. And this is, here you are here. And Carrera is just, it's the name of a city Italy, but it's a name given to the stone. And just because it's called Carrara doesn't mean it comes from Carrara. Anybody that finds a white stone that looks like that, they'll call it Carrara. And that's what happens with most of the stones. They kind of have a generic name to it and that. So you can see this place is just nothing but really, and it's a really pretty marble and high quality marble and that. And this is a quarry in Portugal, and from here their stone came out of there was a real rosy colour, and this is an old quarry that the water finally filled in. Whoops, go back there, sorry about that. This here is a granite quarry. In fact, this is up in New Hampshire. Rock of Ages is the name of the place, very famous quarry here where a lot of the granite that was used, especially in the government buildings throughout the United States, most of their granite came from there. Sorry about that. Here's a granite, actually this is a marble quarry where it's actually underground. It's like a mine, and this is the Vermont marble in Danby, Vermont. And in fact, Grant and I were there, what was that, 20 odd years? God knows how long ago. This place was fascinating. They took us in there and drove us down into this mountain of white marble. And it's just this great big cavernous, and they would cut around there and leave a column that was about 10 or 15 feet square, which was with a support. And they just kept mining around this whole place there. And the Danby White is a very famous marble from here, because you go by any of the national cemeteries, all the headstones in the Arlington and all the rest of them are all with this Danby White, which is a fairly subtle white stone with a little bit of grain to it. It's quite a present thing. So there's various mining techniques there. When they go in there, they come in with these huge, sorry about the quality of the images here, but this is a huge chainsaw, if you like, that they go underneath there and cut it. They also use cables where they'll run cables through that are impregnated with diamond abrasives, and they just run this cable, and it takes hours, but they'll cut out these blocks that are 10, 20, 30 tons, as you can see a couple of them here, where they've just cut them out of the marble, then they'll take them away, and then they process them into slabs or into tiles. Some of the stone finishes that you can get, honed and polished and flamed and then sandblasted. Oops, let's just go back there. When you polish stone, in fact, the polish on, even on metal, a polish is just a series of very, very fine scratches, and the finer the scratches are, the higher the polish will be. And when they take this stone that comes out of the quarries and they cut it, it's all very, very rough because they had a saw, a diamond saw that cut this thing. Then they proceed to grind this down to a flat surface. And then by using ever increasing grits of abrasive, they eventually bring it up. When we do a floor, for argument's sake, we'll start out probably with around about a 200, we'll call it 200 grit, and then we go to 400 grit, and the 400 grit we have to get rid of the scratches that we left behind with the 200, succeeding all the way up for 600, 800, and finally we get up to about 1400 grit, that now you're starting on your polishing. And unless you got rid of all the scratches, the polishing isn't going to get rid of them. So a lot of times you've got to go back and start again on that. And although we don't do that anymore, we did that when we were learning. We did a lot of things when we were learning and that. And the other thing is that a lot of times the higher the polish you get on there, the deeper the colour comes out in the stone and the rest of the excuse me, of the surface there. The hone finish is just kind of a dull, and that's, you know, you're part way up, you might be up to about 800 to 1,000 grit, and it's just a dull, semi-gloss, flat finish, and that, so it's not until you get up to 2,500 to 3,000 that you'll get your high polish on there. Flamed, generally used on granite, and this is where they take a great big blast, propane torch, and blast the surface with this, and it chips off pieces of flakes off there. And this is, what they generally use on exterior use on walkways because it's non-slip, and it's also used as a decorative feature with that. And then sandblasters, as the name suggests, they just, blasted with the sand medium for whatever they're looking for as far as the finish goes. And your flamed and your sandblasters are not ones that you'd really be looking at using as on a floor. It's more, once again, of a decorative, because the maintenance on those things is pretty darn high. So, maintaining it. The important thing is never, ever, ever, especially on a stone like marble, any of these softer stones, use anything such as a cleaner of any kind or any solvent, even water, just plain water. Probably you may have seen it or experienced it. You put a glass of water on a marble table top in the night, and you come back in the morning, you have a ring around there, and that ring isn't coming out. You don't wipe it out because it's actually etched into the stone, and the etched in this, it comes from the acid that's in the water, even ordinary tap water, and that. So anytime you're dealing with even cleaning it with water, it can be very harmful to some of the stones. Not everyone, but some of them can be very, very soft. So using a water with a neutral cleaner is the best way. That way you neutralize the pH and use that to clean the stone, or at best, if you haven't got that, some mild detergent in some water is fine. Liquid dishwashing detergent, very, very mild. But the only downside of that is it can tend to leave a bit of a film behind. and what really should be done first of all is clean the stone and then seal it with a good sealer. And when you clean it, to do this, you really virtually have to have the stone what I call surgically clean, because if you leave anything behind to try to put a sealer on, it's just going to sit on top of what is left there. And you need what we call a penetrating sealer that goes down in and seals the pores of the stone. You don't want anything laying on the top surface because that creates a slip hazard and that. So once again, so use only a neutral cleaner or water, and then dust mop or dry mop. Don't have a wet mop. Note to not the janitors here, but the janitor doesn't know what a clean, wet, dry, clean water and clean mop is. Generally, they're out there with the dirty water slopping the floor, and all they're doing is moving the dirt around, and that's why you end up with streaks and marks on the floor. And a stone floor, all you need is just a dry mop or a vacuum or both, and that if anything gets spilled on it, and especially if the floor has been properly sealed, and that you can just, for the most part, wipe the stain off, like they drop coffee. It's a common thing in office buildings. Everybody's walking around with their coffee and that, and dropping that on there. And just a clean cloth should wipe it up. If it doesn't, don't let anybody touch it, because once again, the janitor goes into his closet and comes out with a multi-purpose thing that he was sold that will, do everything, grow hair and cure warts. And that, but what that has is solvent in it, and it'll drive that stone further into the stone. And then the only way you get it out of there is to try and lift it out with what we call a poultice. And a poultice is generally something made up with a diatomaceous earth and even talcum powder, and we mix different things. It could be mixed water, depending on what the stain is. We could put a solvent in there, make it into a paste. You put that on top, and then we cover it with something like a saran wrap and leave it there for a day or two, and then gradually get it to draw the stain out. So when the graffiti guys come by and do all that little thing, don't try and get that stain out with any of these things. The stain has to be lifted out. So and do that. There's some of the stones here, and here's a building that the outside of this is. I don't know if I can get the little point of it. Whoops, oh, that did that. The outside of this here is a Carrara marble out there. Then they've used a flame granite in that outer ring, which is actually the same granite which is the inner ring, which is polished. And once again, you can see the difference. With the same stone, you've got a completely different finish with it. This here is a travertine floor. This is granite floor here, with the different stones that they put together. And you can barely see this here, but this is the terrazzo floor there. This is the Grand Cafe in San Francisco many, many years ago. They remodeled this. It was an old derelict hotel that the Kimpton Group bought, and then they created this restaurant, great restaurant, a fun place to go. But it's since been, I haven't been there since, but they've changed it all together now. Maybe they'll even take it.
I need to interrupt at this point. We used to do these floors here, and we used to take food credit for partial payment, and Fred used to love to dine here, and I think he might be in one of these back booths here, which was his seat, but
Probably.
yeah, it's
Well,
no longer, so Fred's.
Yeah, well, and I remember sons of mine being there running up a barbell one night too. It works both ways. Here's another instance of a terrazzo floor where they've done different designs in there. Well, we're back here at Oracle. This is a building in Los Angeles, and you can see a whole different bunch of stones that they've used in here, with a verde marble, and then the pink one there, or the orange. It's really an orange. Rojo Alicante in the middle is the Negro Maquina, which is a very popular stone, black with all the white things in there. And here's a stone man's maintenance person's nightmare. There's about 5 different types of stone in this thing here, and each stone requires a different sort of maintenance. So when you do something like this, be prepared to spend a lot of money on having to maintain a floor like that. Here's a whole lot of granite. This is in a residential application, and this house is something else, and you can see in there it looks pretty high quality. And this house is sitting there about 180-yard chip shop to the 18th at Pebble.
This is the owner of the San Diego Padres,
Yeah.
Roger Moore's house.
Yeah.
We did all the metal on the outside of that building.
The roof is all copper, and they dimpled it because they said to buy the golf course there and some balls start hitting the roof, it's going to put these marks in it. So they pre-marked it. This whole thing was all dimpled like golf ball things in there. I had an incredible bunch of bronze statues in there. Grant, how long were you down there working on?
He had all bronze encasement windows, and so the seawater had started to inconsistently turn them. So I don't know, we were there for like 3 months refinishing all the window frames all the way around the
Oh,
building.
I got it there, yeah. It's an incredible place there. Oops. And once again here, you can see this Rojo Alicante, which is a very popular stone there, and they used a verde marble, and this verde marble is almost as hard as granite. It's a very, very hard stone, and that very popular in years gone by. But as you look at some of these old buildings and you look at what they do in the buildings nowadays, and the treatment of stone and metal, it's quite different. And that polished concrete has become very popular, which is another thing which we also do, is polished concrete, which you go down to Home Depot, these places, Costco, they're all polished concrete floors they're doing because they're very, very good to maintain. Probably not the greatest thing that you want visually in a Class A building, but a lot of these, especially the high-tech places and that, the Microsofts and the rest of them, and Facebook and that, they have a lot of these concrete floors in there, and it works quite well in their particular environment. And the other thing you may come across are these wonderful little guys with their skateboards that just, they just tear up there. They'll find a ledge and they go out there and just rip these things apart and do thousands of dollars worth of damage. Well, you can come up with these little items here, we call them a skate stop, and they're generally bronze or aluminum, and we embed them in the stone, and as you can see by there, they're done every 5 or 6 feet, and this kind of stops them from going up there, because if they hit that with their skateboard, it'll just rip the trucks right off the skateboard. But they get very ambitious, and we've been to a couple of places where they've gone in there, and they have actually ripped these skate stops off the wall, and in ripping it off, they destroyed the stone, because the stone comes out in a big chunk along with it, because those, when we put them in there, they're in there to stay. So, and here's for use on a handrail. That's another thing that they like to do, is go down the handrails. And you can put these on every so often. and these are ADA compliant, and that's another thing if you ever run into that particular issue there, and that's.
What the heck was that? We got a koala bear there. What the hell?
Well, I'm going to approve the,
Oh,
I
goodness.
just want to, everybody talks, because you probably noticed I talk funny, and that's because I lived in Australia for 30 odd years of my life, and the country's upside down, so when you're upside down, you talk this way. But anyway, everybody here talks about koala bear. Now, first of all, we need to understand that it is not a bear. It's a koala, and it is what they call a marsupial. And a marsupial is one that carries its young in its pouch, like a kangaroo does. Also, koalas do not drink water. In spite of that, they do not drink water. They eat a particular eucalyptus leaf, which is on that tree they're sitting in there. And Australia has probably 300 or 400 different species of eucalyptus, but there's only one that they eat, and that's where they get their moisture from. But we had some tremendous bushfires there probably 10 years ago, and tremendous heat, and people were finding that koalas do drink water, and I see he's doing it the right way, got the water bottle and all the rest of that, so. What the hell this is doing there with stone, I don't know. But I thought,
Wait, how's this gonna transfer?
I don't know.
That's good,
At
that's
least I'll
good.
say, well, there was that crazy guy talking about stone
Yeah.
and koalas, so. All right, so that's it for me, and that's all. I'll hand it over to Grant, he can tell you all about
What
it.
a great presentation. I've never really seen him publicly speak. He actually did a really good job. He's usually just yelling at me, so it's good to see him. So yes, I'm Grant, and Fred's my father, and we work together in a harmonious.
Well, sometimes.
Yeah. So as Fred mentioned earlier, most of these buildings have a stone and they have a metal that goes with it, and so we kind of complement each other, and he takes care of the stone and I take care of all the metal. The metals, going over Fred's presentation, my display is nothing. He's got the igneous and the volcanic and sedimentary. I got bronze and I got stainless steel. That's it. This building here has the pretty classic stainless steel elevator cabs. They have a polished finish, which we refer to as a number 8 or polished, and a brush finish, which is a number 4. So it's kind of like you could take the same metal and just treat it differently. And like Fred pointed out with the granites, you have polished granite, which would make a shiny black, and then a brushed granite makes a flat finish. So it's sort of the same thing. And an example here is, here's a number 4 brushed stainless steel, and here's a number 8 polished stainless steel. Same material, it's just treated differently to give you this kind of, and here at this building, the elevator doors are polished, and then the returns are brushed. Pretty low maintenance. This particular stainless here, I brought 2 different ones. They're both brushed, but one has been treated with a clear coat, and this one doesn't have a clear coat. This is very common. In fact, the building here doesn't have a clear coat on it. And the advantages of a clear coat, the stainless will not print. There's oil on your hands, and when people touch all the metal, it starts to leave fingerprints, and that's what causes the janitors to have to do constant wiping. And so by adding a clear on it, you don't get the printing, and it's a little bit easier to clean. Now the downside to the clear coated, it does scratch, and it does require maintenance. So you have to come back. The elevator needs to be shut down. It needs to be taped off. The life safety or fire systems